He forged one signature to land a $6 million contract, and lost everything. Fame, love, freedom, all built on a lie. But when the truth came crashing down, he had one choice left: disappear, or rebuild his life, one honest nail at a time. Brent Callahan's pen hesitated for just a second before touching the paper. The room was quiet, the kind of hush that feels like it's listening. Through the large window of his two-room office in a faded brick building downtown, the sun was melting into the city skyline, bathing the desk in a glow that felt warmer than it should have. It wasn't comfort. It was temptation. The paper in front of him was a fabricated bid for the Palmer Civic Center restoration contract, a $6.2 million public project that could change his life overnight. Except the bid wasn't real. The figures, the certifications, the letters of reference, all doctored, stitched together from old projects and edited PDFs. The company profile had been rewritten to sound like he had a full team behind him. In truth, it was just him, his cousin Marvin who sometimes helped on weekends, and a borrowed crew when needed. His hand trembled. Not because he was afraid of getting caught, he had convinced himself the odds were slim. No, it was something older, more familiar, the voice of his father, gruff and unforgiving. Nothing worth having comes easy. And if you cheat to win, you'll never sleep again. Brent signed. 2 weeks later, the city awarded the contract to Callahan Build and Restore. He received the call from a city official while sipping gas station coffee in his dented Ford pickup. His first thought was that it was a prank. His second was pure, radiant joy. And his third, the one that came uninvited, like a splinter under skin, was fear. But fear faded quickly when the money came. The first wire transfer was a dizzying $420,000 mobilization payment. He stared at the bank app on his phone, refreshing it like the screen might laugh and say just kidding. It didn't. He withdrew $2,000 in cash just to feel it. He rented a proper office space with a glass door and a receptionist he hired from Craigslist. He bought himself a navy blue suit that actually fit. At the project site, he barked instructions like someone who'd done this 100 times, even though he relied on YouTube tutorials the night before to understand subgrade prep. Still, progress happened. Slowly, with more hiccups than he let on, but the building rose from its decayed bones. And so did Brent. Clients started calling. Not just from the city, private ones. Big ones. A local hospital wanted a bid on their new parking garage. A wealthy couple wanted a renovation of their historic mansion. He should have been flying high. But something else rose too: tension. Marvin quit after 3 months. "You're not the same, man," he said. "This is a game you're not ready to play." Brent fired him before he could quit. The architect for the Palmer Center, a wiry woman named Elise Fong, began raising concerns. The invoices weren't matching material on site. Workers were being underpaid. Subcontractors were walking off. Brent blamed it on delays, blamed the supply chain, blamed the heat. Anything but the truth. He had no idea how to run a project this size. Then came the inspection. An older man in a beige windbreaker walked through the site with a clipboard in silence, pausing now and then to squint at the steel reinforcements or tap on freshly poured concrete with a knuckle. When Brent tried to explain the delay on fireproofing materials, the inspector just nodded. 3 days later, a stop work order was taped to the front gate. By then, Brent had already put down a deposit on a lake house. He'd taken his girlfriend, Tara, on a weekend trip to Miami, treating her to steak dinners and champagne on the rooftop of a hotel they couldn't pronounce the name of a year ago. She didn't ask many questions. Tara had grown up poor, too. They knew how fast money could vanish, so when it came, they clung to it with the desperation of people who'd spent years scraping by. But now it was getting slippery. Emails started arriving from the city's legal department. There were requests for documentation. Questions about the subcontractors. Certifications. References. And then, a letter. Not an email. Official seal. Signed. It said they'd received a complaint about Brent's original bid. That an anonymous source claimed some of the documents were falsified. Brent read it 3 times. The edges of the paper went soft under his fingers, like it was sweating along with him. Tara walked in, holding a bottle of wine. "You okay?" He nodded. "Sure. Just something from the city." "Is it bad?" Brent smiled, the kind of smile that only cracks in half when no one's watching. "Nah. It's fine." But it wasn't. And deep down, he knew it. The first time Brent lied to a government official, it came so easily he scared himself. "No, ma'am, all documents submitted were authentic and prepared in accordance with the bid requirements," he told the city's compliance officer, a sharp-eyed woman named Darlene whose expression didn't shift once during their call. Her voice was soft, almost maternal, but she asked questions like a prosecutor. She paused after his denial. "All right. We'll be in touch." That pause lingered in Brent's chest for the rest of the day like smoke. He knew what came next. They'd verify. They'd call the names he'd made up. They'd check the contractors who never existed. All it would take was one conversation too many. The house of mirrors he built was fragile, and someone was shaking the walls now. By week's end, he was working late into the night, calling in favors from anyone who owed him a whisper of loyalty. He needed fall guys, scapegoats. He needed Marvin, but Marvin wasn't returning calls. Tara began noticing. She'd ask why his eyes looked sunken, why the fridge was full of half-eaten takeout, why he stared at his phone like it was about to attack him. He told her it was just stress. That building contracts came with pressure. She believed him, or wanted to. That's how love works when it's still in its golden hours. People believe what they need to. But Brent's golden hour was dimming. The Palmer Civic Center, the very monument to his ambition, stood frozen behind caution tape and scaffolding. Local news ran a quick segment about unexplained delays, accompanied by aerial footage of the site. He watched it in his kitchen, volume low, wine glass half full, trying to convince himself this wasn't the beginning of the end. It was Marvin who finally broke the silence. He showed up at Brent's office, unshaven, in a hoodie stained with oil. "You forged that bid, didn't you?" Brent didn't answer. He didn't have to. "I warned you, man. I told you this was over your head." Brent leaned against his desk, voice flat. "Why are you here?" Marvin threw a folder on the desk. Inside were screenshots. Emails. An invoice that didn't match the original bid. One of the contractors Brent had faked had apparently used a real, active license number, and the men behind that number had filed a complaint. "I gave these to them," Marvin said, not looking ashamed. "I told them I was done covering for you." It felt like a slap. Brent's throat burned. "You turned me in. I saved your damn life, Brent. Because this road. You weren't getting off it alive." They didn't speak again that day. 3 days later, Brent was served. Formal investigation. Fraud. Procurement violation. Intent to defraud a public entity. The words were written like a legal incantation, sterile and distant, but each one carried weight like a brick. He sat on the floor after the courier left, staring at the letter in a silence so complete he could hear the hum of the building's wiring. Tara walked in that night and found him sitting in the dark. She didn't ask anything. Just sat next to him. He handed her the letter. She read it all, slowly. Didn't blink. When she finished, she looked at him and said only one word. "Why?" Brent's voice cracked when it came. "Because I thought if I could get just one win, everything else would fix itself." She didn't cry. That was the part that hurt most. She just stood, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. Brent didn't sleep that night. And in the morning, the headlines broke. City contractor under investigation for bid fraud. His name was in the third line. His photo, pulled from a LinkedIn profile he hadn't updated in years, was on the sidebar. Phones stopped ringing. Emails stopped arriving. Except one. From a man he hadn't seen in 15 years. Subject: "We need to talk. Dad." Brent hadn't seen his father since the funeral. Not his mother's, she'd died long before the fallout, but his grandmother's. A gray winter morning, a church that smelled like dust and old wood, and his father sitting in the second pew with a face carved from cold stone. They hadn't spoken then. Not really. Just a nod. Maybe a grunt. Now the old man was reaching out. He reread the email 3 times, fingers hovering over the keyboard. "We need to talk." For words that somehow carried a lifetime of things unsaid. The last time they really spoke, Brent was 19, 1 semester into community college and ready to quit. His father had called him lazy, soft, said men with hands like his weren't meant for books. "I build with steel. You build excuses." Brent left the next morning and didn't look back. Now here he was, 34, accused of fraud, reputation burning, and the only man extending a hand was the one who once refused to help him move out. He answered the email. Where and when? The reply came 10 minutes later, meet me at the shop. Tomorrow. 9 a.m. The shop. Brent hadn't set foot in it since his teenage summers, when he'd worked for free stacking lumber, sweeping sawdust, and watching his father measure twice, cut once. A humble, boxy space behind a chain-link fence, tucked between a mechanic and a warehouse. No signage. Just the smell of oil and pine. When he arrived the next morning, the shop looked unchanged, a time capsule sealed in rust. His father was outside, grinding a metal beam, sparks flying around him like fireflies. He didn't look up when Brent pulled in. Only after Brent killed the engine did the old man glance his way. You look thinner, he said. No smile. No hug. Just an observation delivered like a weather report. You look the same, Brent replied, stepping out. They stood in silence for a moment, the way two men do when they don't know how to be vulnerable but want to say something anyway. You're in deep, his father said, finally. That's what I read. Yeah, Brent said. That's one word for it. Inside, the shop still smelled the same, metal, glue, sweat. His father poured 2 cups of coffee from a thermos and handed him one without looking. No cream. No sugar. Why'd you do it? The old man asked. Brent stared into the bitter black liquid. I didn't think I had a choice. His father scoffed. There's always a choice. That's what makes a man. Brent didn't argue. He didn't have the strength. I wanted to prove something, he said quietly. To myself. To you. That I could build something big. Real. You wanted a shortcut, his father said. Silence again. Brent finally asked the question that had been gnawing at him since the email. Why did you reach out? The old man took a long sip of coffee, then set the mug down with a soft clink. Because I know what it feels like to lose everything. That shut Brent up. I took a deal once, the old man continued. Back in '88. Promised a contract for city benches, for God's sake. I cut corners. Bought cheap steel from a guy I shouldn't have trusted. Saved a few thousand. Paid 10 times that in fines. Had to sell your mother's ring to keep the lights on. Brent's chest tightened. You never told me. Why would I? Shame isn't something you pass down. You try to bury it before it spreads. They sat in silence, 2 generations of flawed men, sipping bitter coffee in a dusty shop filled with regrets. Finally, Brent said, I don't know what to do now. His father looked at him, really looked, for the first time. Then you're finally ready to listen. He leaned forward. You need to own it. All of it. No blaming, no excuses. You want to walk out of this with your soul intact. You face it. And maybe, just maybe, someone will still respect you for it. Brent didn't cry. But his throat ached in that specific way men sometimes feel when they're remembering what it's like to be a son, not just a failure. When he left the shop that day, his hands weren't shaking. Not yet. But they would be. Because owning it meant walking into the fire. And he had no idea who would still be standing on the other side. The courtroom was smaller than Brent expected. Less dramatic. No mahogany panels or sweeping ceilings. Just white walls, scuffed linoleum, and chairs that creaked too easily. It looked more like a neglected DMV office than the place where the next chapter of his life would be written, or erased. He sat at the front, wearing a suit that suddenly felt too tight in the neck. His attorney, a round, pale man named Ellis who smelled faintly of menthol and cynicism, leaned over and whispered, They're not gunning for jail. This is about making an example. Brent nodded, though the words didn't comfort him. Being made an example wasn't less terrifying than prison. It just meant a slower, more public unraveling. The city's legal team filed in, 3 of them, sharp suits, unreadable expressions. Elise Fong, the architect, sat behind them. Her eyes met Brent's once. No anger. No pity. Just something cool and exhausted. He broke the stare first. The hearing began with a recitation of the charges: fraudulent misrepresentation, falsification of public bidding documents, and breach of contract. Each word landed like a gavel on his ribs. Then they called him to speak. Ellis gave him a quick nod. Just tell the truth. Brent stood. The room didn't hush like in the movies. It just went on breathing, fluorescent lights humming, a chair squeaking in the back row. But inside him, everything stilled. I submitted a forged bid to secure the Palmer Civic Center contract, he said clearly. I altered certifications. Invented subcontractors. And used experience I didn't have to appear qualified. He heard someone gasp. A woman. Maybe Elise. Maybe someone else. He didn't look. I did it because I didn't think anyone would give a man like me a chance otherwise. Because I was desperate. Because I wanted to be someone. His throat tightened, but he pushed on. I know that doesn't excuse what I did. But I'm not here to excuse it. I'm here to admit it. And accept what comes. He sat down. There was a pause, not long, but long enough to let shame settle in. Ellis placed a hand on his shoulder. Just a brief squeeze. Human. Grounding. The hearing lasted another 40 minutes. Testimonies. Questions. A dry reading of municipal code that blurred together like static. And then, adjournment. They said the ruling would come within 10 business days. 10 days. 10 days to imagine the shape of your future. Tara didn't come to the hearing. Brent hadn't asked her to. Since the night she read the letter, they'd become ghosts in the same apartment. She slept in the guest room. He cooked only for one. They spoke only when bills were due. But that night, as he sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall, she appeared in the doorway. I watched the live stream, she said softly. Brent didn't move. You told the truth. He nodded once. She crossed the room and sat beside him, their shoulders not quite touching. I don't know what this means for us, she said. But, that was the man I fell in love with. Her voice cracked a little, and then she stood up. Get some sleep, Brent. And for the first time in weeks, he did. It wasn't restful. It wasn't clean. But it was sleep, real, dreamless sleep. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't set you free. But it gives you somewhere to start. The city's ruling came in a slim white envelope with a heavy seal. Brent stared at it on the kitchen table for 10 minutes before he finally opened it, like it might change inside if he just waited long enough. The decision was direct. Permanent disqualification from future municipal contracts. A $75,000 civil penalty. Restitution for misused funds totaling $138,000. And a public notice of violation to be published in the city's contractor registry, a kind of scarlet letter etched into the very industry he once hoped to conquer. There was no criminal prosecution. Just the slow, grinding weight of disgrace. Brent folded the letter neatly. Then he cried. Not loud. Not angry. Just the kind of weeping that sounds like someone quietly falling apart, shoulders shaking, breath hitching, tears tracing familiar paths down a face that had run out of pride. He sold the lake house first. Then the truck. The office lease had already defaulted, and the furniture was repossessed by the same company that had praised his rising star just months earlier. A firm in Tulsa sued him for unpaid drywall invoices. One of his fake subcontractors, a guy he'd loosely impersonated in the bid, threatened to press identity theft charges. That one got settled out of court for $12,000 and a written apology. The money drained faster than he thought possible. He took a job at a lumberyard 2 towns over, stacking pallets and unloading shipments for a manager who didn't care about his name. Every morning, he woke up at 5:30, packed a ham sandwich, and worked 10 hours on concrete floors. It was honest. It hurt. One day, while stacking pine boards in the sun, a man in a blazer came up to him, squinting through sunglasses. You Callahan? Brent straightened. Yeah. The man held up his phone. You're the fraud guy. You built half the Palmer Center before they shut it down. Brent braced for a punchline or insult. Instead, the man chuckled. Hell of a mess. But the work that did get done. My firm inspected it. Structurally sound. Better than half the union jobs I've seen this year. Brent blinked. What do you want? I run a private restoration firm. We don't touch public contracts. And we don't care much about headlines. He extended a card. Call me if you're ever tired of lifting lumber. Brent didn't take the card. Why would you hire someone like me? The man smiled. Because you already learned the hard way. Which means you might not screw up again. Then he walked off. Brent stared at the card on the stack of boards. He didn't pick it up. That night, he walked home in the rain. His boots were soaked, his hands raw. But his mind, oddly, was still. Tara was in the kitchen, sipping tea, reading something on her phone. She glanced up when he walked in, drenched. "You didn't take the umbrella." He shook his head. "Didn't check the weather." She stood, grabbed a towel, and threw it at him gently. "You're a mess," she said. "I know." He dried off silently. Then, finally, he said, "I think I'm going to start again. Not big. Not like before. But honest. Small projects. Private clients. No shortcuts." Tara studied him. "And if no one hires you?" He smiled, a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes but tried to. "Then I'll lift lumber until my arms fall off." She didn't say anything. Just stepped forward and hugged him, tightly, without permission, without preamble. And he held on like she was the only thing not falling. Because maybe she was. Brent didn't call the men from the lumberyard right away. He kept the card folded in his wallet, near an old photo of him and his mother. She'd been smiling in a way that felt impossible now, framed by a backyard full of late summer weeds and plastic lawn chairs. He'd been 13 then. Skinny. Hopeful. Still someone who thought hard work always paid off. Instead of chasing a quick fix, Brent began slowly. He spent nights writing estimates for people who didn't always hire him. Seniors needing handrails. Neighbors looking to patch fences. He charged fair prices. Showed up on time. Left no mess behind. Word began to spread. It wasn't glamorous. He rebuilt decks. Replaced window frames. Helped a veteran repair the ramp leading to his trailer. The pay wasn't great, but the work was clean, real, and when he finished a job, people shook his hand. Some even called him back. One day, he got a call from a woman named Denise who ran a nonprofit for homeless veterans. Their shelter needed a roof repair, but they'd already been turned down by 3 contractors. "We can't afford much," she warned. "Just some supplies, and coffee." Brent didn't hesitate. "I'll do it." She laughed. Just like that. Just like that. It took him 3 weekends. He worked alone, except for 2 of the shelter residents who volunteered in exchange for lunch and stories. They told him about Afghanistan, about being forgotten, about the nights so cold it hurt to breathe. Brent didn't ask questions. He just hammered shingles beside them, shoulder to shoulder. When the roof was done, Denise tried to give him a check. He shook his head. "Put it toward hot meals." She insisted. So did he. A week later, the shelter's website posted a photo of Brent, dusty, sunburnt, smiling with a hammer in hand, under the heading, "The Builder Who Came Back." It went modestly viral. Not nationwide. Not even statewide. But in the local community, it sparked something. Calls came in. Not thousands. But dozens. Enough. Tara saw the post before he did. "You're in the news again," she said, sliding her phone across the table. This time for the right reasons. Brent stared at the photo for a long time. "I'm not sure I deserve it," he said quietly. "Maybe not," she said. "But maybe it's not about deserving. Maybe it's about what you do next." That night, he finally picked up the business license forms he'd buried in a drawer. Callahan Restoration. No gloss. No fake team. Just a man, his hands, and the choice to rebuild, one project at a time. A month later, he walked into his father's shop again. Same dust. Same smell. Same silence. "I wanted to show you something," Brent said, handing him the flyer he'd printed. His father adjusted his glasses. "Read slowly." Then looked up. "You're using the family name." Brent nodded. "I figure it's time I stop running from it." The old man didn't say anything for a moment. Then he stood, reached into a drawer, and pulled out an old metal level, his favorite, worn smooth by decades of use. He handed it to Brent. "Start straight," he said. "The rest will follow." That night, Brent went home to a small dinner, a quiet kitchen, and a woman who still believed in him. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was real. And that, for the first time in years, felt like enough. 1 year later, Brent stood in front of the Palmer Civic Center, the same building that had almost destroyed him. It was finally finished, completed by another firm under tight oversight. The city had opted for a clean slate. Brent wasn't mentioned in the ribbon-cutting speech. His name was erased from the blueprints, the records, the plaques. But he remembered. Not just the mistake, the forged bid, the shame, but everything it had unearthed. The parts of himself he didn't know were broken until the whole structure collapsed. He stood at the edge of the crowd, uninvited, unnoticed. The mayor cut the ribbon with silver scissors. Cameras clicked. Applause scattered like dry leaves. And Brent turned and walked away before it ended. He had a meeting in an hour, a woman who wanted her grandmother's porch restored. He'd measured it twice already. The rot ran deep, but the foundation was good. That was all he needed. Callahan Restoration wasn't making millions. Some weeks were tighter than others. But it was steady now. Real. A slow building hum of work that didn't rely on lies to stand. Tara had moved back into the main bedroom. They didn't talk about the months apart, not directly. But she watched him now the way you watch a man balancing on a beam, not with doubt, but with quiet hope. Brent saw his father most Sundays. They didn't say much, just worked on old machines in silence. Occasionally, they'd share a beer. Once, without prompting, the old man said, "Your mother would have liked what you're doing now." Brent didn't reply. Didn't need to. Some wounds stop bleeding long before they ever stop aching. One afternoon, he got a call from Denise at the shelter. "We're expanding," she said, her voice lit with joy. "A new kitchen, a classroom. Someone donated the funds anonymously." Brent smiled. "That's amazing. Well, we need a contractor. And I can't think of anyone better." He hesitated. "You know I'm not the cheapest." "No," she said. "But you're the kind who shows up." The project took 4 months. This time, he brought on a few guys, one from the shelter, one from his lumberyard days, and a young apprentice who reminded him of himself, hungry, unsure, rough around the edges. They finished under budget. On time. On opening day, a small plaque was installed near the kitchen door. It read, "Built by Callahan Restoration, because second chances deserve sturdy walls." He didn't ask who wrote it. Back at home, Brent found Tara sitting on the porch, legs tucked under her. She looked up, shielding her eyes from the sun. "How was the dedication?" He sat beside her. Pulled her close. It felt like closure. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever wish you'd done it different?" she asked. Brent thought about it. The lie. The crash. The disgrace. The repair. "I wish I hadn't lied," he said. "But I don't regret who I had to become to make it right." They sat in silence, wind rustling the trees, the late afternoon light falling soft across the porch. And in that stillness, Brent understood something deeper than redemption. You don't build a life once and call it done. You build it again, and again, brick by brick, truth by truth, until it's strong enough to hold the weight of who you really are.